When you first open volume 17 of the Ecce Homo collection, you have to realize you aren't reading a traditional autobiography. There are no dates of birth, no family trees, and no linear accounts of where the author lived or who he worked for. Instead, this is a spiritual and intellectual map. It is the account of a man who has spent his entire life in a state of intense, almost violent struggle, and who is now finally stepping into a period of what he calls great coolness. The book opens with the speaker describing his current state of mind. For years he felt as though he were being scorched by the sun of existence. He describes a life defined by heat, passion, and the kind of psychological friction that wears a person down to the bone. But as the work begins, that heat has faded. He has reached a plateau of detachment. This isn't the detachment of someone who has given up, but rather the coolness of a creative observer who can finally look at his own life and the world around him without being blinded by the glare of his own suffering. This transition is framed through the idea of the seventh solitude. The speaker explains that he hasn't just woken up one day and decided to be alone. He has navigated 6 distinct stages of isolation, each one deeper and more demanding than the last. Think of these solitudes as layers of a social skin that he has had to peel away. The first few stages might involve distancing himself from the crowds or the common opinions of the day. But as he moves deeper, the isolation becomes more radical. He isn't just avoiding people, he is stripping away the very parts of his identity that were built to please other people. By the time he reaches the 7th solitude, he has arrived at a mountain peak. He is completely alone, not out of sadness, but by necessity. He believes that the highest form of thought can only happen in this rarefied air, far above the noise and the expectations of the valley below. Once he is on this peak, the speaker introduces one of the most striking images in the book. He describes himself as a fisherman on a mountain. Now, usually, a fisherman stands by a lake or a river. But this man is casting his line into the vastness of the future. He isn't looking for fish, he is looking for a new kind of human existence. He is trying to pull a new way of being out of the chaos of time, something that has never been lived before. This is the core of his mission. He believes that the current way of existing is exhausted and decayed, and the only way forward is to imagine and summon a version of humanity that can handle the truth of existence without breaking. To achieve this, the speaker makes it very clear who he is leaving behind. He spends a significant amount of time dismantling the 2 groups he finds most delusional, the virtuous and the learned. He doesn't just disagree with them, he views them with a kind of cold contempt. He calls the virtuous people prostitutes to gold. By this, he doesn't necessarily mean literal money, though that is part of it. He means they trade their integrity for the currency of public acclaim. They act in ways that look good to the crowd so they can feel a sense of social security. To the speaker, this is a form of spiritual prostitution. They aren't seeking truth, they are seeking a gold star from a society they should be questioning. Then there are the learned men. These are the academics and the structured intellectuals. The speaker argues that these men are fundamentally incapable of true wisdom because they are too cold and rigid. He uses a vivid phrase here, saying they cannot eat fire. For him, wisdom isn't about collecting facts or organizing data into neat categories. Wisdom is a destructive, passionate process. It requires the ability to burn down old ideas to make room for new ones. The learned men are too afraid of the heat. They prefer the safety of the library to the danger of the flame, and because of that, they can never truly create anything new. As the speaker dwells on this mountain peak, he begins to contemplate the end of his own life. He doesn't express a fear of death, but rather a specific desire for how he wants to go. He speaks of a godlike friend, a figure who represents the ideal of a victorious death. This friend is someone who lived with such intensity and will that his death was not a defeat, but a final, completing act. The speaker wants to die with that same energy. He doesn't want to fade away or be worn down by age and sickness. He wants his death to be a conscious choice, a final stroke of the brush on a completed painting. He sees the end of life as the final opportunity to exercise the will. The work reaches its climax with the image of the mountain fire. The speaker decides that his role is not to bring people up the mountain to join him, but to stay on the peak and light a signal fire. He describes the people of the future as storm-tossed seamen, wandering through the chaotic and dark seas of existence without a compass. By lighting this fire, he is providing a beacon. He isn't offering them a map or a set of rules to follow, but a point of light to navigate by. He is signaling that it is possible to survive the storm, to embrace the solitude, and to find a way to exist that is authentic and powerful. To prepare himself for this role, the speaker emphasizes the divine art of forgetting. This is one of the most practical pieces of advice in the book. He argues that the ability to forget is essential for survival. If we carry every grudge, every failure, and every piece of outdated knowledge with us, the weight of the past will eventually crush our vitality. Forgetting is not about amnesia. It is about the active choice to let go of what no longer serves the present. It is a cleansing process that allows the spirit to remain light and agile. Ultimately, the journey described in Volume 17 is one of embracing destiny. He calls this amor fati, or the love of fate. He doesn't suggest that we should simply tolerate the hard parts of our lives, but that we should love them. He argues that the crooked, violent, and painful aspects of our existence are the very things that forge us into something greater. To wish for a life without struggle is to wish for a life without growth. The speaker doesn't seek to escape the chaos of the world. He seeks to master it by accepting every single part of it as necessary. Now that we have the shape of the journey, it is worth looking closer at what this actually means. The core of the work is a study in the dialectic of solitude. Most people view being alone as a void or a lack of something. But for the speaker, solitude is a tool. It is a progressive process of stripping away the social self. Every stage of solitude he describes is a way of asking, who am I when no one is watching? Who am I when I have no one to impress and no one to lean on? By the time he reaches the seventh solitude, he has found a version of himself that is independent of the world. This is the only place where true creation can happen, because if you are still listening to the crowd, you are just echoing them. This leads directly into his idea of destruction as creation. This is a recurring theme throughout the book. He believes that you cannot build a new house until you have burned the old one to the ground. This is why he is so hard on the learned men and the virtuous. They are trying to renovate a decaying structure, whereas he wants to clear the land entirely. This is where the art of forgetting comes back in. Forgetting is the fire that clears the land. By forgetting the old values and the old identities, he creates the space necessary for a new way of being to emerge. The metaphor of heat and coolness is also central to understanding the speaker's psychological state. The heat represents the struggle, the passion, and the agony of the human condition. The coolness represents the perspective that comes after the struggle. He isn't saying that the heat was a mistake. He is saying that the heat was the fuel. You cannot reach the coolness of the mountain peak without first enduring the scorching heat of the valley. The two states are linked. The coolness is the reward for having survived the fire. When he talks about the storm-tossed seaman, he is acknowledging a fundamental tension in his philosophy. He spends the entire book praising solitude and the rejection of the masses, yet he spends the end of the book trying to signal to those very people. This reveals the true purpose of the philosopher in his eyes. The philosopher doesn't live for the present generation, which is usually too blind or too scared to understand. Instead, the philosopher lives for the future. He is a bridge. He endures the isolation and the misunderstanding of his own time so that he can leave a marker for the few great souls who will come later. His critique of modernity is woven into all of this. When he mocks the virtuous and the learned, he is actually describing a culture that has lost its vitality. He sees a world that values stability over truth and fame over integrity. He views the modern person as someone who is terrified of the void and therefore clings to social conventions and academic degrees for a sense of safety. By rejecting these things, the speaker is attempting to break the cycle of decay. He is trying to prove that a human being can stand alone, without the support of a church, a state, or a social circle, and still find a reason to exist. The final vision of the victorious death ties everything together. If life is a creative act, then death should be the final stroke of that act. The speaker rejects the idea of death as a tragedy or a medical failure. Instead, he sees it as the ultimate expression of the will. To die victoriously is to die knowing that you have lived your life according to your own laws, that you have embraced your fate, and that you have left a signal fire for those who follow. In the end, Volume 17 is a call to a very specific and difficult kind of freedom. It is the freedom of the mountain peak, where the air is thin and the wind is cold, but the view is clear. It is a reminder that greatness often requires a radical departure from the comfort of the crowd and a willingness to destroy everything you thought you knew about yourself. The speaker doesn't offer a happy ending in the traditional sense, but he offers something he considers far more valuable: the possibility of a life that is entirely one's own.